We're still in the beginning of our series, well, I guess right in the middle of it, on heaven. Last week we talked about that this world, as we know it now, is not our home. This world is not our home, that we are citizens of another place, citizens of another country. We read out of Colossians 3 last week. It said, "You have been raised to life with Christ, so set your hearts on things that are in heaven, where Christ sits on his throne at the right side of God. Keep your minds fixed on things there, not on things here on this earth." It should be our prayer every morning. Lord, today, keep my mind fixed on heaven and not on things that I'll face today here on earth. We have been deceived by the enemy to become very comfortable here. We have been deceived by our own comfort that we have gotten comfortable in this home, in this place. And that he would desire that we have no anticipation for what's next. But God desires that we anticipate and that we look forward to our heavenly home. I was reading recently about a man in his 60s who had become homeless later in his life. Hadn't always been homeless, but he had become homeless, lived on the street for years. But what he didn't realize was that he had a bank account that existed that he didn't even know about. See, while he had become homeless and had lost everything that he had, and for years and years had lived on the streets in just abject poverty, during that time, an account in a bank was receiving money month after month after month being put away for him. Not only money being put away, but interest building. Month after month after month. Till one day he found out that he wasn't penniless. That he wasn't broke. That he had no reason to be homeless. Because there was a bank account that had been accumulating money all those years. That he didn't even understand or even know about saving, being put away, deposited on his behalf. And one day when he found out, he realized not only could he not be homeless, he could buy his own home. And that's what he's doing. Buying his own place with the money that had been saved and put aside for him. We read in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19, where Jesus says, "Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Today, I'm going to talk about this world. This world is temporary. And all that's in it is temporary. For our hearts to be fixed on things in heaven, our treasure has to be stored there. Where we place the greatest importance is where our heart is. If we place the greatest importance on things on this earth, then your heart will be on things of this earth. But if we place the greatest importance on heaven and in eternity, then our heart will be in an eternity as well. The things of this world are temporary. They're not eternal. But we store our stuff in banks. We store our stuff in storage units. If you want to make a lot of money, buy a storage unit. Don't rent one. And rent it out to others to store their stuff. We have so much stuff because we decided to accumulate so much in this life that when we filled up our garage, we buy a storage unit to put our stuff in there. Then when we fill that up, we get a bigger storage unit and put our stuff in there. Then we run out of that and we decide to have a garage sale. So we clean it out only to get more stuff to fill it up again. To think of those that have placed an importance on the eternal and not on things of this earth. You think of missionaries that have given up so much all around the world because they don't place an emphasis on that which is temporary, but on that which is eternal. I read about a young man that had given up when he was in his early 20s, had given up all that he had to go on the missions field. It wasn't that he didn't have much to give. He had a whole lot to give. He was heir to the Borden dynasty. And he gave it all up to go and be a missionary in Egypt. When all those that would think that what he did didn't make any sense, he'd given up an unbelievable amount of money to go and live amongst people, amongst Muslims that hated him. And he died just a short time after being there on the field. At 25 years old, he died. And he was buried there in an Egyptian cemetery in the middle of a city full of Muslims. And so many that would look and would say it didn't make any sense. On his tombstone was written the words, "Apart from faith in Christ, there is no explanation for such a life." The treasures that we store in heaven remind us. They will remind us of our lives here on this earth. So the treasures that we store up in heaven are not figurative. They're not make-believe, but they're real. When Jesus said we're storing up treasures in heaven, he meant we are storing up literal treasures in heaven. And those treasures are reminders when we go to heaven. Those treasures that we receive are reminders of those things that we have done while we are here on this earth. We'll look at a treasure that we've received in heaven, and it'll remind us of the decision we made one day to give. We'll look and we'll see what we have given up. We'll see the lives that have been changed because of this treasure that we've been rewarded with. There'll be a reminder of all that we've done while we are here on this earth. But those heavenly rewards are not temporary. Although they remind us of the temporary things here on this earth. Luke 6:8 says, "Because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. He'll reward us." We're all equal. In the eyes of God, we are equal when it comes to rewards. We all have the same opportunity, our place in life, our wealth here on earth, our poverty here on earth is inconsequential to the treasure that we receive in heaven. The treasure that we receive in heaven has direct ties to our decisions and what we do while we're here on this earth. We're told there's several reasons we receive an eternal reward and a treasure. In Luke 6, we're told, love your enemies and do good to them. Lend to them without expecting to get anything back, and your reward, Jesus says, will be great. We're told that giving generously will receive a treasure and reward. In Matthew 19, Jesus says, I want you to be perfect. Go, sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Paul reminds us in his letter to the church in Philippi that we all have an account in heaven. There is a place in which if we are being given rewards and treasures are being stored up in heaven, we must have an account. Just as this homeless man had an account that he did not even know about or had forgotten about, that was storing up day after day, month after month, year after year, so we have an account in heaven in which we are storing up day after day, month after month, year after year. Paul wrote, now that I'm looking for a gift, but I'm looking for what may be credited to your account. What we do gets credited to our account. Some of us better start saving now. Some of us have great big accounts in heaven that are waiting for us, and some of us have very small accounts that are in desperate need of deposits. There are some, we talked last week, that dread going to heaven. It's because they've stored up so much stuff here they can't stand to depart from it. There are some that don't want to go to heaven because they don't understand that place is where the true treasure is. That place contains the rewards that are eternal, a treasure that is eternal. But because we have stored up so much here and accumulated so much that we place importance on in this life, we don't want to go to the next. But it just makes sense. Storing up treasures in heaven it just makes sense. Jesus says in Matthew 13, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought the field. Man that saw that there was a treasure. And he sold everything that he had, all that he thought was precious that he owned, all that he had once placed an importance on. He sold it all in anticipation to what he would receive. It just makes sense. We don't think that this man who sold in this parable that Jesus told is nothing spiritual about it. He saw the opportunity and he took it. You don't have to be super spiritual to see that makes sense. If we understand that the true treasure awaits us in heaven, we would gladly sell all that we have here. We would gladly put all that we have here to receive the greatest reward just as he did. Didn't matter how attached he was to what he had. He knew that the greater reward was in the land that he would acquire. It was a great motivation to sell all that he had. We've all heard the phrase, you can't take it with you. And that's true. I heard a pastor one time say he'd never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul. Because you can't take it with you. And that may be true for everyone, but it's not necessarily true for us as believers. You can't take it with you, but you can sure send it ahead. You can't take it with you, and you can't bring it once you get there, but you can make sure that when you arrive, it's there waiting for you. And that short-term loss that we feel on this earth is a long-term gain. In 1 Peter 1 says an inheritance that can never perish, an inheritance that will never spoil or fade. And this inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of a greater worth than gold which perishes, even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Though for a little while it says we may suffer, though for a little while we may be in grief, there is an inheritance that is yours. There is an inheritance that never spoils, never rusts, never fades away, never breaks down, never gets stolen. That is for you. What we gain here in this life is short-lived. Our trials, our difficulties are short-lived. The 4th chapter of James, he reminds us our life is but a vapor, a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Like watching a tea kettle boil. And it begins to blow the steam out of the kettle. You can't reach out and grab it. It escapes and then disappears, and so is our life. The deception that's taken place is that we can't imagine heaven. Or we've pushed it out of our mind to only become focused on things here on this earth instead of life. Instead of life in heaven. See, God places value in doing, not just believing. It's a parable Jesus told of a man that gave his servants treasure. He gave one servant 5 bags, he gave one servant 2 bags, and he gave one servant 1 bag. The servants with 5 bags and the servant with 2 bags took it and used it. And they increased what had been given to them. But the one who had been given 1 bag simply buried it. He didn't want to take a chance on it. And the master came and scolded him and said, you could have at least done something with it. But he looked at the one that had 5 bags and the one that he had given 2 bags. And he gave the one that had doubled the 5 and the 10, he gave him the one that had not been used at all. And he told the 2 servants who had actually used what he had given them, well done, Good and faithful servant, you have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." The master replied, "Well done." Done. It means to do. In the Greek, it means to do. Do. Action. Not just believed. A reward in heaven is pleasing to God. There's some that would say, I don't work for rewards. I just do it because I love God. As if that makes us more spiritual. To say we don't desire a reward in heaven, I just do it because I love God. We didn't come up with the rewards. He did. I'm not telling you you're going to receive a treasure in heaven by what we do here on earth. He said it. Just as we tell our children, if you do this, if you do this, if you do this, you'll receive a reward. So God tells us, you will receive a reward in heaven if you do what I've asked you to do. The treasure idea is God's, not ours. He gives him joy. It makes God happy that we're storing up reward, that we're storing up a treasure in heaven that can never be corrupted, that can never be taken away. We see the Pharisees in John 12. Jesus said, "For they loved the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God." They received their reward. They received the reward from man because they wanted the temporal gratification that comes from being patted on the back in this world, instead of receiving an eternal reward from the Father. Luke 6 says, "Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward in heaven is great." I would rather receive my reward in heaven than the Pharisees' reward here on earth. It's giving up treasures in this world so that we gain the treasures in the next. Great missionary martyr Jim Elliot, why my son's name is Elliot, and the way it's spelt, the way that it's spelt, who had lost his life giving all that he had written in his journal the famous quote, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain which he cannot lose." See a great illustration of that in John 12 when Mary came and brought the perfume. Brought it to Jesus and broke open the box that it was contained in. Something that was worth a great deal of money here. And was scolded by many that had gathered there for wasting something so precious. But she used it to wipe his feet, to pour on his feet and wipe with her hair. But Mary understood. Mary understood that those things that we have in this earth, the things that we have in this time are temporary. What we have is short-lived, not eternal. Oh, but we have a chance. Oh, but we have an opportunity to store treasures in heaven. Where neither moth nor rust can destroy or thieves can break in and steal, an eternal reward. Tonight, we have our annual business meeting. The word that brings terror into so many people's hearts. Tonight, I'll give you an opportunity in our business meeting tonight, and I'll share a vision that we have, and I'll give you an opportunity as we share what the vision is and what I believe God would have us do and where He would have us go. You'll be given an opportunity to vote, not only with your voice, but also with your earthly treasure. To invest, not in this earth, and not in the things of this earth, but in those things that are eternal, and those things that will never perish, and those things that will never melt away, but a reward for all of eternity.